welcome to Behind the Grind, an entrepreneur think tank where we sit down with entrepreneurs and high-performing individuals to talk about their journey. My name is Jimmy O'Donovan. I'm sitting here with my co-host, Tucker Massey.
What's up, everyone? So, Behind the Grind is sponsored by Long Hollow Creatives, a boutique co-working and co-op studio space. Today on the podcast, we have Hurst Butts, the owner of VolumeONE Hair Salon, Wilfrid's Barbershop and Fine Goods, and Jack Cotter, a boutique distributorship for tools used in the beauty industry. Hurst has 15 plus years in the industry, and he has collaborated with names such as Hangout Music Festival, Dandelion Salon, that's out of Nashville, Tennessee, Melrose and McQueen, that's out of Atlanta, Georgia. He's been featured in Modern Salon as well as Salon Today. And both this salon and barbershop have been recognized multiple times by In Weekly. How you doing, Hurst?
Morning, guys.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's nice to be here with you two this morning.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's a great morning.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking your time.
Of course. Happy to be here. Share the journey.
Drop some knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trials, tribulations,
Gotcha.
laughs, tears. You know.
Blood, sweat.
Woo. Yeah. Let me tell you.
Let's dive in.
Sure.
Little quick, where you from? I know we have a personal relationship,
Yeah.
so I do know a little bit, but kind of tell listeners.
Share the listeners. Sure.
Yeah.
The long story short, as a native of Canada, I was actually born in Anchorage, Alaska. 15 years in Canada, suburbs of Toronto. Moved to the States just prior to high school, I guess, or to middle school actually. I was probably 14. Been in the States ever since, up and down the East Coast. 3 different high schools, 3 different states. I kind of add that to it just because it's a part of my story. I think being having
Moving
to
around.
be in different social situations, especially through high school. 3 different high schools, 3 different states. That was a whirlwind.
That's a lot of fun.
Moving to a city, moved to town the day of orientation. And you're walking into a class that's been together for 4+ years or what have you. So, anyways, I feel like that helped me to strengthen social and communication skills. You know what I mean? You're kind of
100%.
forced to be into these certain situations, and so yeah, I landed here in Pensacola, Florida. Graduated high school from here, and ventured out to University of South Florida in Tampa for a little while. Then I came back and started actually a small business of my own where I was detailing and crewing on yachts. And so I worked at the pier down at the end of the street there, and I was taking on small jobs of washing owners' boats down there, and the company that I was working for said, hey, if this is something you're going to do, then you're going to have to quit here and be licensed and insured. And so I kind of took it upon myself to do that, and I had to get $1 million liability insurance policy to be able to work on those docks and those boats. And I went out and did that, and I was probably that was 18, 19 really, prior to my 20s. And so that was really my first venture of having to do what you needed to do to be an entrepreneur. And it was a struggle for sure, especially being that young, and the winter times it's cold and you still got to get out there and hustle and things like that. And there was plenty of work, but you had to do it in the proper timing and to be able to get paid when you needed to get paid. And so I learned a lot through that process.
What was the draw to that? Was there a passion for the water? Did you see like a need, and you just wanted to fulfill that?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, I loved, I think that's part of being where we are here on the Gulf Coast. It's such a beautiful place, and that put me on the water and around this machine, which is a power vessel or a sailing vessel that is kind of obviously and still is to this day a big part of my life, and what drives me and motivates me to continue to move forward is because I enjoy being on the water and I enjoy boats. And so working on the docks put me around them, but then to take it a step further, I was able to establish relationships with clients and with the guys that were doing the sport fishing tournaments and things like that. allowed me to have a little bit of a closer relationship with them, and maybe have the opportunity every now and then to go for a sail or go for a fish. And so it just allowed me to have a closer relationship with those guys. So yeah, part of being on the water, but then also the drive to, I think, when I was brought that opportunity of saying, hey, if this is something you want to do, I think it was a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that they looked to me to be able to do that, you know what I mean? And so I said, sure. And before I walked out that door that day, when they said, hey, you're gonna have to, either quit and get licensed and insured, or we can keep you on. And I said, well, I'll quit and go and get licensed and insured. And so I think it was within the next week that I was licensed and insured and was back on those docks doing my own thing.
Since we're on the topic of, your first side hustle turned into business, you're that young, you're 18, 19 years old, learning stuff out the hard way. What's one of the first failures you remember in that side hustle?
Oh man,
and how did you get around it?
Sure. When the money runs out and you don't have a gig lined up, then you're stuck. You know what I mean? And so that was a big learning curve for me, just knowing like, oh wait, now I have to go and find another gig. And so I think that just kind of backs into scheduling properly and having the due diligence to be able to do what you say you're going to do. And then building the schedule back into it. But of course, being so young, I was just kind of hustled for every gig that I could.
Almost like a door-to-door salesman.
Totally
like
right.
Going to people's boats.
Yeah. And I did have a good aha back then, and that was kind of something that I still use in my business model today. Whereas, and we see a lot of it nowadays with the recurring subscription model. But it was finding gigs with these guys that I could wash daily for them or weekly for them, and they would put me on a retainer. And so that was something that I really did learn from the get-go, was being like, okay, if I can take these gigs and span them out over a monthly payment cycle, then I know that I have some sort of recurring payment. So I think if there's a aha there, it was recurring payment or a subscription model or a retainer. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
And how long did you run that?
I was in that for a couple of years, 18 months, 24 months maybe, where I definitely ran that gig. It was called Ride the Waves Boat Works.
Okay.
I can remember I had a local tattoo artist. His name's Gabe Smith. He's been around for years, and he drew the drawing for me, and I had the t-shirts made and all that jazz. And so
awesome.
it was pretty legit for being how young I was.
Yeah,
so.
It's a good feeling when you get established at that young of
Right.
an age.
Yeah.
So transitioning out of detailing, what was the next?
Man, I was getting my hair cut by a friend that I graduated high school with, and that was style had kind of always been my thing, and it actually had always been in the back of my mind. I mean, I can look back to when I was probably 5 or 6, some early memories for sure, and I was, cutting the tops of piece of paper to look like hair and cutting shapes into them, and I had always had a fascination with my hands, I think it was, or scissors even, or tools or knives or anything that was like, I think that's what it was then, was putting these scissors on my hands and cutting these shapes. It was, maybe at that point it was something that you shouldn't have had, but I think I can remember those memories distinctly, and I think when I look back on it now, there's obviously, there's something in there that was saying, hey, this is something that needs to get out,
So you always feel like you've been a creator?
Yeah, it's in some way, shape, or form for sure. So, long story short, the friend that was cutting my hair, her father was opening a salon in the next little while, and I'd always expressed my thoughts or inclinations to go into beauty school, and she's like, well, you should talk to my dad, blah, blah, blah. And one day he called me up on the phone, and he's like, hey, I'm looking for a male to work, and run my front desk. And I was like, I'll come and talk to you, and that was kind of the beginning of the end, really, His name was Phil Fennell. He's been in the industry for quite some time, and he's been a mentor and leader of mine through actually this whole entrepreneurial process as well, and I'm sure we'll get to that, but yeah, he said, come on board, we'd like you to have you on the front desk, and it was winter time at that time, and so business was a little bit slower, and I was like, sure, I can do this and do everything in the mix, you know what I mean? I'd like to have a little steady revenue stream here, and it seemed like something a little different. I got to dress the part, look the part, and be around different people, and so rolled with it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your dad had to actually be, kind of persuaded that this was like a good choice for you to go into the
that's an interesting
hair
story.
industry?
So I was in working the front desk for a while, and this kind of leads into the next step, which is when I decided to actually take the move and be a hairdresser. So at that point I was working behind the front desk, and I was establishing those relationships with the clients and then with also the personnel and the staff, and it wasn't soon after when I saw some of that cash come over the counter as well with tips, etc., that I was like, maybe I'd like to be on the other side of things. And so I expressed my interest to Phil, and he had a partner up in New England that would be willing to do an apprenticeship with me, so I wouldn't have to go to hair school. It was just, you'd have to fulfill a certain amount of hours in the salon, and you get paid, etc., and it was all hands-on, and it seemed the best way to do things. And so, like I said, it wasn't too long after being behind the front desk that I decided that I'd rather be on the other side of things, and so I took that plunge. And when I decided to take that plunge, then that's when I had to, pseudo convince my father, who's an engineer and very engineer-minded, and that was the route I was going to take. And so it's one of those stories where we're going to bring my dad into the office with Phil, and we're going to explain to him that Hurst is going to move to New England for 3 years and live in this guy's basement to be able to apprentice at this salon, and then he's going to come back here and, do his thing. And so that was the time. Yeah, and that was it. You know what I mean? And my father was on board. He had always kind of been supportive, and so it was just an interesting way to say, hey, I'm going to back out of business school, which I was at PSC at the same time when I was running Ride the Waves, and still trying to just do what I could do to find that niche. And so fortunate to Lauren, that was her name. She was cutting my hair at the time. She's also a salon owner now, and she's a good friend of mine. And Phil was her father, so fortunately for them, they were able to kind of reel me in, and here we are. So that was an easy, good 19 years ago, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah, almost 20. So if we look back, it's almost 2 decades now since I've really been in the entire industry, running the front desk at a fairly large commission-based hair salon 20 years ago.
That's amazing.
And VolumeONE, was that established in 2008? Is that what it was?
Yeah, 08, 09 is when I established the name VolumeONE.
Okay.
And you kind of get asked all the time where the name came from, and that was a time where periodicals and magazines were really your only form of inspiration or motivation to be able to, that was tangible or visual, and of course we had the online services, but nothing like we do today, where it's in your face all the time. And so magazines were a big part of my daily life. That was what we go to the bookstore, and we subscribe to different periodicals from all over the world, really, Britain or Italy, and so we always had this bookshelf with all these different periodicals, and they were usually issues or volumes, and so that kind of always stuck in my head as far as looking back to that time. It was a very impressionable time for me. It was some real growth going on, I think, in those early 20s for anybody, man or woman, and so I was going through, a lot of experiences during that period, and so that was something that kind of really stuck to me, was just always going back to these magazines and periodicals and being very inspirational in my life. And then even now, when we look at this mixer that's in front of me, there's a big volume knob right there, right? And music obviously being a huge inspiration and motivation to really anybody, you know what I mean? I'm sure you guys could relate to that as well. So the volume knob, and then if we were going to relate it to the actual beauty industry, you're talking volume in hair, or volume in your developers, et cetera, and so that's where we lead into the name VolumeONE,
That's
and
awesome.
then the idea was maybe that there'd be eventually a 2 or 3, or you know what I mean, and that would kind of somehow play into it, and that had always been in the back of my mind. So
scaling, big picture, there's always something more than just.
Yeah, totally. I think even from the get-go,
Yeah.
VolumeONE would lead into volume 2 or however we would
Right.
work it, so.
Is that
Yeah.
something that's still in the back of your mind?
Scaling, yeah, and I think it's kind of, as we lead through the picture with scaling into the barbershop and then other, side projects as well, it's definitely not as easy as what it comes across in your head.
Right.
I've learned through the lessons and the hardships of, how to do it and what not to do through that process, so.
Well, I mean, even from the beginning of Volume 1, you started with how many chairs? It was yourself.
It was an 800 square foot space in downstairs in the building, and I had started out renting a chair, and then it moved on to renting that space, subleasing that space from the person that was in that building, and then it moved on from there. So then I brought on another chair rental, so it was myself and one other chair and somebody else in there, and then we had 3 chairs, and there were 2 other hairdressers in there, and then we brought on an apprentice, and then we had somebody to run the front desk. So by the time that we had the opportunity to move into a slightly larger space, we had probably 5 employees, subcontractors at that time. So everyone was paid on the 1099.
When starting that, having those independent contractors, what was going through your mind with wanting to choose whether they should be an employee or an independent contractor, and how was the process of,
Yeah, it's a good
starting
question,
that up?
Tucker, especially for the listeners out there. So this was prior to the big hit of being an independent contractor or booth renting like it is now in the industry. But this was more because it was just simple at the time, and I was so young and unaware of what it means to actually be an employee and or what it means to actually be an employer. And I think that without getting too far into it, because this is a whole other topic, a whole other podcast that we could go into, the industry is so in depth, but business in general, I was young, and it was a learning curve, and the easiest and simplest way to be able to do it at that time was to pay everyone as a 1099, knowing that they were going to end up paying their own taxes, and I wasn't getting involved in payroll tax. So I think that's kind of the cut and dry of it, and they were happy with that as well. And so we were so small at that time that was the best way to keep a record of our books, et cetera, et cetera. I can even remember an employee's father getting after me because I hadn't supplied her with a 1099 in time to be able to file her taxes, and these are real trials and tribulations of being a business owner that young and really having, honestly, like no idea really what you're doing, you know what I mean? And so that's how those are the ways that I learned to how to approach things and how to get those things solved, you know what I mean? Yes, it's somebody's dad calling me up on the phone being like, hey, Hurst, where is my daughter's 1099? Because now we're late filing taxes, and you're just like, your pits start sweating all of a sudden. You're like, well, I really actually have no idea, but let me go ahead and get that figured out. And we did, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I had to research and figure it out, hire at that time, you're working, you have a client or two that's a lawyer or something like that, or a tax attorney or an accountant, and they're able to come in and be able to sort some things out for you. And so that was kind of the real turn of the wheels where you're like, oh, I gotta get some things figured out here and be a little bit more legit.
So kind of touching on that topic a little bit, so you talk about the change from 1099s to having employees, and what stresses, what fears came with that, as now you're in charge of these people's livelihood. Like that's something that no matter what industry, obviously, you can relate to.
100%. So I'll kind of rewind a little bit. 800 square feet, a few employees, new space down the street comes available, 1,200 square feet, option to grow. Took that opportunity. And at that point, I was still paying everybody on a 1099, and at that time, I was a sole proprietorship. So everything was just ran through my Social Security. We weren't an LLC. I was just running as a sole prop, right?
Okay.
So the name VolumeONE is established in Sunbiz, and I'm still running everything under a sole proprietorship. So it's just coming through my you don't have a tax ID number. Basically,
Right.
you're utilizing your
Using
social. Exactly. So, which is where you start. You know what I mean? That's where I started Ride the Waves, and obviously this is my next step to getting a business license, a salon license to be able to open the salon, run the salon, and everything was under at this point my name and as a sole prop. So, 1,200 square feet, grew to a few more employees, and this was a real this is a very gray area for me. This growth that we experienced in this new space. Went through quite a personal struggle. I was probably going on 30 at this time, so I had been in the old space just as myself for 2 years, and then we expanded to VolumeONE, a few chairs and renting the space, a couple more years. Now we're in this new 1,200 square foot space, and while we're building this space out and I'm in the middle of the move, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and I was so involved in my employees and the business and the growth. It was we decided for her to go into treatment up with her family up in Ohio, and so I'm flying back and forth every other weekend, and man, I can remember, vivid memories of those times, just like total breakdowns while I'm painting the ceiling of the new space, and had my friends around me at the time that, I look back on it now and it really is all such a blur, that whole period, but fortunate to have the people around me that I did. And I think it just, again, it really kind of challenged me to really, continue that momentum forward, you know what I mean? If not just for myself, but especially for my mom, you know what I mean? And the family that was around me, including my brother. And so he kind of comes into the picture here in a little bit. And so we ended up opening the space, 1,200 square feet. We grew to a few more employees, and that was 8 years ago, so 2011, 2012, I guess, and 6 months in, my mother ended up passing away, and again, total blur, plane tickets that we really didn't have the money for, and then funeral costs, and everything else on top of that, and still trying to pay employees, not really sure where the money is or where it's coming from or how we're going to get it, because at this time it's my revenue that is really allowing the business to flourish.
Right.
If I'm not in the salon behind the chair, there wasn't
it's your service dollars.
Exactly.
Right?
You know what I mean? It was me and cash too. This was all cash. I hadn't borrowed any money up to this point. I had no credit cards. I was taking every dime that I was making it, and turning it right back in to be able to sometimes pay my employees. So the struggle was real for sure. That was a tough time. And we were in that space for a couple years, and I was approached by a local developer to look into this much larger of a building. And so post my mother's passing, where I'm just in the grind zone trying to just build and ramp up, and it was during this ramp up period that I made some fortunate decisions, and those decisions were: 1, to hire a consultant to help in my back end; 2, I switched from a sole prop to an S Corp LLC, and I started paying my employees as employees. So no more 1099, and this is kind of really where I look at, and we're able to track the growth of VolumeONE, was kind of from this point on.
So let's stop it right there. Let's
Yeah.
pause. So right now we're going into 2020. Entrepreneurship is on the rise. Everyone has it in their social media bio. Everyone wants to own their own business.
Right.
Back when you started VolumeONE, we were having a recession, 2008. So what processes did you go through then to get started? Like, did you have banks or family members tell you this is a terrible idea? What was going through your mind back then in 2008?
Man, support. Support was tough, I think, at that time. Even because I had this huge, and still do to this day, like these big ideas. You know what I mean? And big picture. It's always a big picture for me. And to try to explain big picture to a father who is
Old school.
yeah, you know what I mean, and you know, it's hard for him to see outside of that straight and narrow,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So I had to keep it very kind of small-minded for him. But my mother, on the other hand, she was a huge supportive and support system and advocate, especially in the very beginning, you know, 2008, 2009.
It's great to have.
Yeah, you know, and that was a tough time, you know, leaving the security of what I had, knowing that I had a paycheck coming in every week, and just stepping out of that and moving into something else. I can remember the phone calls with my father on the phone while I'm driving to the salon to put in my 2 weeks, you know, knowing that day they were going to say, well, this is your last day, you know.
Yeah.
And he's saying, all right, just, you know, whatever your gut feels. And so that was kind of what I was going with. I knew that I had the clientele to be able to support me through it. And at that time, yeah, I was going through, that was so much change, you know what I mean? Like I was saying before, you know, inspiration, motivation, what do I want to do? Do I want to, you know, I can remember it was shortly after I left that you know, I hopped a train with some friends and to Nashville. Like literally these growth periods through my life, that's what I was going through at that time, and it seemed the only way to be able to continue on with that growth was to step out of the security of what I had.
What kind of fears did you have starting out? Because, you know, this is a hair salon, this isn't, you know, not the medical field, like this is the furthest thing from a quote-unquote necessity that people have, right? And so what kind of fear did you have of what if?
Being in the service industry.
Yeah, totally. I think, you know, especially that recession period, you know, and I say this all the time, I can look back to where, you know, being in service industry, but everybody has to get their haircut. Everybody gets their haircut. You know what I mean? So sure, some are going to end up doing it at home, but if we're talking, you know, the clientele that we're talking about, these are people who would come in with Ziploc bags with cash and coins that they had like stuffed away, you know. So getting their haircut was obviously a priority, you know.
Right.
And so maybe it's for those that are every 3 or 4 weekers, or maybe they were 5 to 6 weekers. It's taking those and pushing them out to 3 or 4s to 5 or 6, or the 5 and 6ers to 7 or 8, or something like that. So then you're going to span them out a little bit, and that was a way that we were able to keep those people through the recession. But it's an interesting business, you know what I mean? The beauty industry and cutting and dressing hair is never going to disappear. And so I think we're almost recession proof, and I knock on wood saying that, you know what I mean? But honestly, it's one of those things that just through those simple tactics of maybe it's the wife that takes her extra change and puts it in a Ziploc bag to be able to know that she can get her haircut every other month.
And I think if anybody walks into VolumeONE, you're gonna realize the culture, right? So that certainly, I feel like, has a big part to play in it, and retention.
Totally. Oh yeah. And I think that this is where we're at now, kind of in the story, is where we really started to build and hone in on that culture, you know, because now we're out of the recession. I had gotten through one space, moved to the next space, you know, built it out appropriately, and again, all with cash, no banks involved, you know, going back to your you know, statement that you said the last question, and I was just doing it, you know, and this is really when I go back to all of the mentorship and I'd always, this kind of rewinding, but I'd always found a way to position myself in front of the people that I wanted to position myself in front of, as well as be a part of a management team or a key holder, no matter what. So even when I went to apprentice up in New England, and I was up there for 3 years, I positioned myself as a key holder, and I would open and close a salon knowing that I was going to make an extra $50 a day, or $50 a week, excuse me. But it also sat me on the management team, so that way I was there for management meetings. You know, and sure, I was young at that time, and I can remember, like, you know, being the one that's rolling in late, you know, and this is kind of funny, you know. I live in the basement of the salon owner, and so there would be plenty of nights or mornings where we had this most beautiful, like, 7-minute drive to work, but where he's driving to work and I'm like just coming home so I can take a shower, you know?
That's awesome.
And so But that was it, you know what I mean? Then I'd go and take a shower, and then I'd show up at the management meeting, whether I had anything to contribute, but I was able to listen and to hone in and to hear what the problems are, or maybe what the good things are, or what my way of solving something would be. And so this kind of honed me into the position that I'm in today by putting myself in front of the right people, rubbing elbows, shaking hands, or taking the responsibility of being a key holder, and then that's kind of where we are, now moving into, allowing other people to have those positions and or, feeling like they could lead a team. And I think that's kind of where we are in the story now, is like building that culture and coming out of that 1,200 square feet and building a staff to 6 or 8 people, turning everybody into employees, hiring a consultant, and now it's about building that culture.
Really quickly, as an apprentice, basements of New England during the winter time, which sounds god awful.
Yeah. No windows.
No.
It was horrible. It was horrible. And this is like
down there?
it was a newer home, so
Okay.
it was heated, but it was like a dungeon. I mean, you
Yeah.
could sleep down there till 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Did you know you wanted to own a salon? Coming from this business that you had of detailing boats, so you're going from the top of an ownership to the absolute bottom of the totem pole with an apprenticeship. Like that, there's obviously a huge jump, in
Totally.
ego check as well.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I was a part of 2 major operations. So the salon that I was a part of here was kind of the it salon, or definitely one of them. Top 200 in the country salon today, and the salon that I worked at in New England was as well. And so we're talking top tier stylists, top tier systems and management behind it. And I thought that I was starting into an operation that was top tier,
Right. Okay.
and it was. And so what I could do there was obviously start low, but still make sure that I was in on those operational things, or within that management realm, that I wasn't just known as that lowly apprentice, right? You know what I mean? That I was somebody that had some sort of authority. And if it meant that I had to be there to open the door, I was closing the door every night, then that was my authoritative role.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was always searching for that, some sort of authoritative role, even if I'm in somebody else's operation,
Gotcha.
So the goal there was to get to the top as fast as I could, and that meant, being a rock star hairdresser.
Awesome.
What are some of the biggest things you learned from your mentors back in that day that you're still using today, and you think that our listeners could take advantage from?
Sure. That almost.
Maybe just like 1 or 2. I know there's probably many.
Yeah. I think something that I took from that experience and sitting in those management meetings was learning from a lot of their mistakes, and that has really helped me today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Listening to those trials and those tribulations and knowing them really, really early on has helped me today. So I think if I could encourage anybody to find some sort of authoritative role, to be able to sit in on any of those management meetings, to know those problems that were coming in and how they handle them, right? So the problem solving that went on at those meetings was huge, and that's really, I think, helped me today.
Like you mentioned, not being able to give anything to the meeting, but just shut up and listen.
That's
learn.
it, 100%, totally.
I think that's a big ego thing too, because nowadays, not necessarily my generation, but people just feel like they're entitled and they should just, they should have it. They should start a business and just be at the top making a bunch of money. But no, you need to check your ego, go to the bottom of the totem pole and just hustle and be in those meetings. And if you were never in those meetings, you wouldn't have learned what you know today.
Yeah, there's no way. I definitely look back to that and knowing that was a huge part of what's helped me get to the position that we're in today,
Right.
And then outside of that, it's utilizing your people within to help develop your business, or putting them in those roles, the people that are currently part of it or have been with you for a significant amount of time. So growing from within. And I think that maybe at that point in time I wasn't aware of it, but now I look back at it and they utilized me for a minimal amount or small wage to be able to hold responsibility, key holder, open, close. Now I don't have to show up at 7 a.m. and be there till 10 p.m. I can pay a minimal fee to have somebody within the organization hold that responsibility. And then that also encourages them and pushes them to that next level of responsibility.
Right.
So I've utilized that within the organization since we started to be able to really work on and help to grow the people from within instead of trying to find it without.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of back to the story. We are 2014. We're
14.
now in the current location.
Yep. Local developer comes to me, says, "Hey, we'd love to put you in this new space." It was 3,200 square feet. So
going from 12
you
to
could imagine,
32.
1,200 to 3,200, right? Downtown Pensacola is growing, flourishing. They come with this 2-story space, prime location, these main cross streets of the downtown area, and I really didn't know what to think. To be honest, I was scared shitless, really. This is all new territory for me, right? Like I've never signed a lease up to this point.
Right.
It's all been handshake deals. We're talking, $100,000+ of tenant allowance. I had no idea what tenant allowance was. We're dealing with a big time transaction and we're trying to project numbers to know if we can even cover our rent. And we're putting together rent schemes with percentage rents so that way we can ramp ourselves up to be able to get to a point where we can maybe actually afford the space. So this was a huge transition for VolumeONE and the staff that we currently had.
And for yourself personally too. I mean, that's a huge jump.
Such a learning experience. It was, and then continuing to this day, there's still huge learning experiences like this. And I look back to this and it was definitely a huge part of becoming a businessman. Outside of just being a hairdresser and having a few employees.
Yeah.
So
now we're, 2014, 2015. Where does Wilfrid's come along in the picture? Wilfrid's comes in a little bit further down the way. So we're from 2014 to 2015, just to give everybody a little bit of a hindsight of what this growth looked like. From 2014 to 2015, we went from, we increased our revenue by 250%. So, and if you can imagine what that year looked like in building people, phone lines, computers, money, cash, credit cards, tips, taxes, all of that. You look at that and it's completely mind-blowing. That year, industry standard wise, would have just been is huge. 250% growth in 1 year from 2014 to 2015 is just astronomical. Do you think that growth was created from moving into a bigger location?
It was 100% bigger location. It was the location. It was all of the systems that we had put into place. It was being ahead of the curve on the social media game, Instagram, Facebook.
Putting all in on social.
Having the right people put in place. So I learned so much through that process, and that growth was just absolutely amazing, and what really kind of propelled us into the position that we're in today.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Which leads us to Wilfrid's.
Right.
So,
what sparked that interest of starting a barbershop?
That was in the realm of obviously when men's grooming was on the rise, and you were seeing it more, right? What was becoming acceptable? Yeah, Dollar Shave Club. What are we seeing that's all of a sudden acceptable. Beards, mustaches, right? You know, everything I believe is cyclical in any industry, right? In fashion world, in the beauty industry, even in a business environment, right? Like even look at what we're doing here. We're sitting around talking to a bunch of mics that people are listening to. We used to listen to talk radio way back in the day because that's how we communicated, right? Before there were televisions, et cetera, et cetera. And I think everything is cyclical. And so here we are, you know, looking at each other face to face and sharing stories that people want to listen to. And so I think that's pretty neat. So this was going back to, you know, the 20s and the 50s, 20s, 50s, 60s, you know, grooming is one of these things. Back in the 20s, it was post-war. And you know, it was easy, quick haircuts off the ears, and they repeated that in the 50s and 60s, and then here we are now doing the same thing, where all of a sudden we're going back to the 50s and 60s, where the barber is and men's grooming is popular, and so at this time that was happening. We're seeing these beards and Wall Street guys with beards and mustaches and things like that, and so obviously men's grooming had made its way into the industry, and so we had to follow suit, and I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve with that, and we hired a couple barbers in the actual salon, and then it became known that we were going to have to, you know, the next round would probably be to open a barbershop at some point in time. So at this point, I've hired my brother on post the passing of my mother. It was my way of keeping us together, and I would have rather worked with no one else than family and my brother, and so he came on helping us with social media and photography, and he was a huge help and push in this little hump to be able to get us ahead of the curve, and having somebody in-house that could produce content like that was unbelievable. And if it wasn't for him and that effort that he had from the very beginning, then we obviously probably wouldn't have been ahead of it or where we are today. And so so he's been a part of the organization ever since, and he's the one who we stepped out to put in charge to be able to run Wilfrid's.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we're, you know, thus far we've been all consumer, you know, business to consumer. Like, let's kind of transition a little bit and talk about Jack Cotter, because this is now a completely different realm of business, and you know,
all while you're having two major brick and mortar shops going on day to day.
It's both of you guys have been involved through that process. You know what I mean? And I think we're all obviously here for a reason, because we're all like-minded and you know, idea guys, right? Obviously, and so you know, the idea was to, obviously, a side project. You know, my mind's always moving. You know what I mean? For those that there's
people
those
that
can
easily say
totally, you know, and so I'm always like on to the next idea. And so this was a real like step down, step back for a minute, take a look at what's going on. Aha for me, because you could have all these ideas and you could like act on them like everybody, like the Gary V's of the world tell you to do, just do it, right? But this was an aha where it's like, just do it, but know your limitations, right? Like, know that you might not necessarily have the time to do this right now. You know what I mean? So, long story short, the idea was to take this tool that I had used from the very beginning, 15 plus years ago. It was a scissor brand that I had worked with and, you know, brought in not only for myself, from a certain individual, but also for my staff too over the years. You know what I mean? Because I believed in it so much, and that's what it was. It was belief in this tool that empowered me to be able to do what I did every day. And so, the idea was through research and it was probably 6 months, 8 months, maybe even a little bit of a year of research to be able to get to a point where I was able to get a hold of the owner of the brand of scissors and create a little bit of an inventory of my own. And the idea was to take a tool that I believed in and be able to turn it around and offer it in a different capacity than maybe the owner of the company was, or in a different realm that other distributors were, to be able to put this high-end tool that I believed in into other hairdressers' hands. So the by hairdresser for hairdresser type thing, boutique distributorship, take a high-end tool and start with a high-end tool like a scissor and be able to turn it around and offer it in a different way, e-commerce, to the individuals that would believe in it as well. So that's kind of where the idea started. Like I said, it took a year or so of research to get to a point where I was able to have an introduction to the owner of the scissor company, and I flew to Philadelphia to meet with him for a day in a hotel room, look over his inventory, and then we kind of made a deal from there.
What were so you've built 3 cultures, 2 brick and mortar, and now you have the scissors. What were the hardest things starting out for building your brands that led to this awesome culture that you have for all 3?
Man, I think utilizing and believing in the right people around you to be able to do that,
Right.
and you can't do it all yourself, right? So the right engineer to engineer your logo and help you out understand that culture. I think it's so important. We could have these big ideas, but if we're just trying to, I think it's so important to allow other people into that, to be able to help you access those ideas more and or be able to help them flourish. And so it's been putting the right people around me through those growing periods and through those idea phases. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Those idea phases, putting the right people around me to be able to help ignite that and grow it into the culture that it is today. So
yeah, and you talk about having people around you. As you started by yourself, so everything was on you, and being a little bit of a micromanager, like, because of the fear of, okay, well, if I don't do it, it doesn't get done right.
totally.
What steps did you have to take internally to feel comfortable enough putting those people
Be able
and
to
then
take a step back.
trusting them,
Yeah,
right? Because
that's been, if we're to say where we are today, right? It's going on 2020. I've been in the building at 7 West Main Street now for this will be our going into the 6th year. We're celebrating VolumeONE, 10 years as establishing VolumeONE. And now, looking back in comparison to where we started and going on what Jimmy was saying here, trusting and putting those people in place to be able to help get me through every single one of those phases. So outside of building brands and trusting in the people that you utilize to help you build that brand, inside the organization, it's utilizing the people within that have been a huge help and process to be able to get us to where we are now, i.e. Somebody who comes in as an apprentice, moves to the apprentice world and becomes a hairdresser, and has maybe a major in marketing. Now I can utilize that person to be able to handle all of my social media and push that forward, and handle all of my internal marketing events. There's somebody internally that I utilize to handle events. Those that handle numbers and all of my back-end stuff, inventory management, payroll, etc. That's another person that's put in place to be able to do that. The VOAs, that's what we call our apprentice program. There's somebody that is in place to be able to understand and to be able to do all that. Now that we have all those people in place, was putting them in place easy, or was that easy for me to let down my guard and not micromanage? Most difficult thing probably that I've ever done,
Yeah.
But we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for being able to put those people in that position and trusting them to do their job. You know what I mean? And I continually get pushback saying, let us do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is no need for you to ask that question right now. All you need to do is do what you're good at, and I'm fortunate to be able to say that now, you know what I mean? But letting go of that micromanaging was a huge obstacle for me, and a huge obstacle not only internally in VolumeONE, but also scaling into the barbershop. If we look where we are now in the barbershop, going through so many trials and tribulations, But originally my plan with the barbershop was that I would work up there one day a week or two, and that I would be much more involved than what I am. But I learned the hard way that all that was doing was enabling me to micromanage more, because it was never going to be what I wanted it to be, because I'm not there all the time.
Right.
And so I learned fairly quickly that the best thing for me to do there was not micromanage, delegate properly from a distance, and then back check and back into my delegations. So delegate on the 1st of the month, check back in on the 15th, and then redelegate again at the end of the month going into the next month. And so that was kind of creating this system and knowing from my mistakes what it was going to take to be able to continue to scale. And I think I see that now through these other opportunities and other, ideas that I have of what it's going to take to be able to get to that next step. Even with Jack Cotter, as small as it is, I put those people in place, right? And that means not taking a check for myself, then that's what I have to do. But it's the only way to see the big picture, knowing that maybe a year or 2 or 3 years down the road, because I've done the right thing. Exactly. Because I've done the right thing and put the right people in place and allowed them to take maybe a little bit of the profit, knowing that 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, then maybe I'm going to see the reciprocation from that. So, yeah. So micromanaging, huge lesson learned, and it's super, super, super difficult to be able to let go of some of that. But what it's allowed me to do now is to be able to work on the things on growth. You know what I mean? And knowing what that next idea is or what the next opportunity is, and be able to concentrate on my people, and I'm able to concentrate on them differently than I was if I was micromanaging. If I was micromanaging, it would be, I would be I would be almost instigating the problems, right? You know what I mean? Because you're too far into it. Whereas from the outside, I can be that mentor and that leader, and I can be the motivator, and I can solve problems, but I can solve problems a little bit differently by delegating properly. And so, big lesson learned. Micromanaging is a no-no.
Yeah.
But there was a period where that was the only way to do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And delegate, put the right people that you have in staff, and trust them to be able to do their job. And I think that they're going to learn from that as well. You know what I mean? And I think that we've seen that internally and seen the growth and where it can take us. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about some collaborations, because I think collaborations are huge, not only for business growth, but for personal growth.
Of course, yeah.
So you have this giant collaboration with Hangout Music Fest.
Yeah.
What was the first year that you did that?
17 maybe?
17. Yeah. So, being in Pensacola, Florida, we have this giant music fest an hour away in Gulf Shores, Alabama. I think the first year that you guys set up shop there during the 3-day fest, I walked there and said what's up to you, and you guys were at this giant tent. Yeah. It all looked really great.
Yeah.
Explain your experience of getting that collaboration with Hangout. How did you manage to reach out to them?
Yeah.
How'd that go? And then let's talk about your experiences there and how that's propelled VolumeONE.
Of course. I think that goes back to what I was just talking about, even in the very from the get-go, right? Rubbing elbows, shaking hands, putting yourself in front of the people that you want to put yourself in front of. And, former mayor has been a friend and mentor of mine for quite some time, and due to the relationship that we've had behind the chair, really, and I knew that he was, I expressed the interest in the idea to him, like, hey, we would love to be able to, I think this would be very cool for Hangout Fest, and I knew that he was chummy with the owner of Hangout Fest, and so I just kept putting it in his ear, and finally, it allowed for that phone call. One day it was actually behind the chair where we called Shaul and we said, what's up, Shaul? Got my buddy Hurst here, and he's got an idea for you at Hangout Fest. And that was kind of, long story short, and from there, we were able to get into the festival. And what we do there is, we have a huge 40 by 40 foot tent in the sand. We bring in the heat. Yep. smoking hot. But it's such a cool opportunity, and what it is, it's not only a cool opportunity for the staff and what the staff gets out of it, and what the culture of the salon gets out of it, but also for Hangout Fest and other people as well outside of here. And
It's a win-win.
collaborations with other salons, and I bring other people in, and so it's been a great thing that falls right in the middle of the year to create that staff camaraderie. It's a team building experience for the staff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I pick everyone up in a van every morning. We're out there for 12 hours a day. Everyone's coming back every night. We've got 6 to 8 chairs set up out there. We've got a team of 10 to 15 that goes out there every year. We grew this last year to having a couple chairs in the artist tent as well, and so we're back there taking care of the artists, which is such a cool experience, not only for myself, but for I bring a stylist back there with me every day. They're rewarded that opportunity to come back there and hang out and experience that experience. And so, you know, there's so much more behind what it actually is. You know, your feet being in the sand all day doing a festival here, it's so cool, but what it's done for the camaraderie of the staff and the culture building is huge. Outside of that, social media, it's a huge spike in our social media every year. We can really depend on that every year to be able to really help us out with our analytics. And we look forward to it every year, really, you know, on the business side, really for that, you know. It ends up, you know, Hangouts takes care of the staff, they pay the staff, we get a fee for it for our time and energy as well. But I also look at it, we do come off a little bit of change just because of you know, we're taking care of the staff when we're out there, et cetera, and I look at it as a marketing expense, and it really is that, you know, there's no money or nothing that you could purchase that's going to give you that spike in social that we get just from being out there. And even outside of that, like I said, the culture that it builds within the community of the salon and the barbershop, and then as well as other salons, we involve another salon here in town to be able to come out, a couple of their hairdressers to come out with us. We have some people that come from Atlanta, Nashville, I mean, you name it. It's a huge experience for all those involved.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I think if we were to go back and what it's about, it's all about the culture, right? It's those little experiences and that having that presence that gives us and helps us to build that culture. Not only nationally, but in the community as well. So,
what's one podcast or book you're listening to or reading right now that's sort of propelling your game or helping you out?
Yeah, How I Built This. Guy Raz, man, that guy's
it's a great listen.
Voice is great. You know, which voice-wise you guys are killing the game. You guys got a nice, you know what I mean? It really comes across really well. I enjoyed listening to the podcast, so I appreciate you guys for that.
Especially Jimmy's.
Yeah, he's definitely got it. I'm reading, I'm a nonfiction guy. I'm reading a book right now called Last Plane in the Sky. It's an oral history of 9/11. Super intriguing.
Yeah.
And inspirational, motivational as well. You know what I mean? Those stories are unbelievable. It's lets you know, it gives you a big insight as to really what happened that day. One at a time. I'm learning that with books. You know what I mean? Like you could have a stack of 2 or 3, but by the time you get through, it's 6 months later. You know, so one at a time with the books there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You know, starting to wrap up a little bit, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now, and where do you see yourself in 10 years from now?
5 years, I think, in a similar role to where we are right now. You know, some scalable opportunities I think we'll work on. You know, if it's another location or 2 within the area or the proximity. And again, utilizing the people that I have in place to be able to help me do that. And 10 years, I think it's more of a corporate grind for me. I'd love to be in a corporate role at some point.
Take a step back.
Yeah, and working for a larger corporation. You know, being the suit guy. just for a little bit. I think it's always intrigued me, and I think that after the years of putting in the time and the energy that I have over the last 15 plus years, and then by then, we're working on going on almost, over 2 decades, working on 3 decades, I'd have some experience to be able to bring to a corporate situation.
Just a little experience.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, within the industry though. It's definitely still in the industry, and being able to help those like myself. And I think that's, that puts a big smile on my face now, knowing that maybe in 10 years that I could have the opportunity to sit down with somebody like myself and be able to, give them some advice and some opportunity, or be able to steer them on the path that they want to steer, or help them with scalability or whatever it may be.
Right.
That's kind of where I see myself in 10 years, is being able to take a different role in a corporate setting, which is interesting.
Going from the mentee to the mentor.
Yeah, but also working for somebody else, you know what I mean? But I think we'd all like to, after doing it for yourself for so long, the idea of actually doing it for somebody else,
and have a lot of that weight lifted off.
Totally, isn't a bad thing. So that's kind of my 5-year, 10-year, 5-year working out of this, you know what I mean? Having things set up and the system set up enough to where we can trust the organization that we built, the people that we built within that organization, to be able to continue to run it.
Yeah.
So that way I can work towards that goal of 10 years of working for, a corporate company and helping those that were in my situation, like all of those that have helped me through the years. And I mean, we could go through names and names and names of those that have helped me through the process,
Right.
I'll make note of one that was a huge kind of light bulb for me over the years, and it was about 2015-ish, I guess, after we had moved into the new location, and we had gone through that monumental growth period. Nick Rojo, he was on that television show, What Not to Wear. He was a hairdresser on there. He's always been a huge mentor of mine. We were able to bring his product line in and work a couple years with him in the salon. He came in the salon for 2 years and did a thing with us, and that really helped us to grow and gave us a little bit of that visibility as well by having him here in town. But we were having a conversation over a drink one night, and he asked me if I considered myself a businessman. And I said, no, I'm more the creative type. And then he asked me a few numbers, what was your retail to service last month, and then tell me about your service dollars and your retail dollars last month. And I didn't know those off the top of my head from the month prior. And obviously that showed that I wasn't in that position right there, right? I really was a creative, and I still am a creative. And I was focused on that, and I wasn't as focused on the business, obviously. And so I really took that to heart, and from that point on is when I probably would have considered myself a businessman outside of being a creative and a team builder.
Yeah.
I really took that as a little gem, and saying that here's what you need to do. You need to be a businessman, and you need to think yourself as a businessman. And until you do, then you're not going to make any money. And that's what he told me. He said, Hurst,
Wow.
he said, Hurst, until you think of yourself as a businessman, you're not going to make any money. And not that this is all about, the dime. I think we can see that in building the people that we built and put in the position that we're in. There's a lot of things that we shouldn't have done, that we spent money on that we shouldn't have, and there'd be a lot more left if we didn't. But again, this is a big picture for me, and it's all about building people and building that stability to be able to get to that point next day to where maybe we can step away. But thanks to Nick Rojo for giving me that little gem, because it was from that day forward. Now I have a system. I know my numbers. I can tell you my numbers from last night. I can tell you my numbers from 2 weeks ago, last month, last year, et cetera, et cetera. And so it really has helped me and progressed me and propelled me to being in the position that we're in today.
So even for the listeners that aren't in the hair industry, can you let everybody know what's the easiest way to get in contact with you? For those
social media.
Yeah, inspiring, or those that are inspiring to become.
Yeah, I love, and I think both you guys could tell the listeners that, and I can say the same about you guys. This is, I'm a passionate guy that enjoys. There's so much more to the back end of a business. I mean, we could probably sit here literally all day
more
long.
hours.
Yeah. We could dive deep into some numbers. We could dive deep into some culture, social media, marketing. I mean, you name it. This industry, the beauty industry, is packed full of every little bit of that, creative, not creative, right? But I really enjoy, especially over the last little while, the consultation process and the business process of not only being maybe an individual contractor, but maybe if you're looking to build a salon or build a barbershop, or not only just outside of, not just within the beauty industry, but outside of the beauty industry. Right. Are you looking to build a team, build culture? Yeah. I really have learned through all of my lessons, and we've learned a lot over the last 15 years about building business, and not only building business, but building people. And I think if someone was to ask me on the street what I do today, I would say that outside of being a hairdresser and being creative, that's what I do. I build people. Yeah. And I really look forward to those new people that we can bring in every time to be able to build them into the position that they're in today. So at VolumeONE Salon is the salon. We're located in Pensacola, Florida, 7 West Main Street, corner of Palafox and Main Street. The barbershop is called Wilfrid's Barber and Fine Goods. It's located at 5 Palafox Place, right across from Vinyl Music Hall, in the heart of downtown Pensacola. And at Wilfrid's Pensacola is the Instagram for that. My Instagram is at Hurst Alexander, and Jack Cotter is at Jack Cotter Co.
Awesome. Again, want to say thank you so much for your time. This is
this has been a fun
time.
This has been awesome.
That was a lot. I hope I wasn't doing all the talking. I think you guys asked a lot of great questions, and I'd love to come back.
I certainly see a second and third
episode. It's all right. Pick up right where we left off. So I want to thank you guys for the opportunity on this
100%.
Beautiful November morning down here at Long Hollow Studio. Thank you.